actually get this question a lot. People would come up to me in the grocery store and be like, you know how that happens, right? And I'd be like, no, tell me, please, right here in the pasta aisle. How does it happen? And there are even days when I myself question why I have so many kids. I'm one of 4. Cedric is one of 5. His mom is one of 8, and his dad is one of like 10. It was sort of in the cards to have a big family, if you will. Basically, my first words were baby, baby. I'd be a little baby in a stroller and be like, baby, baby. I'd always read Parents Magazine in the doctor's offices instead of like the highlights for children. So I've been pretty baby oriented my whole life. I was always carrying around a baby doll as long as I can remember. And even though I was Jehovah's Witness and we're often admonished to wait until paradise to have kids, my best friend and her husband had a vasectomy before they got married in order to ensure that they wouldn't have kids in this system. My brother is in his 60s and he has never gotten married or had a family. This is not uncommon. In fact, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses have put off having a family, waiting for paradise to come first. I didn't want to grow old if Armageddon and paradise, God forbid, didn't come until I was an old person. I wanted to have kids. I always wanted a little boy first. And so when we had our first baby in 2007, I got my wish. And he was so much fun. And I had such a blast being a mom. And when he was around 2, I knew that he needed a sibling. I thought it would actually take us longer, but it was like the first time we tried. And so that was kind of a surprise to us because we expected to maybe have a little bit more wiggle room there, but she just popped right in. At first we were like, oh no, it'll be okay. And so when I announced that pregnancy to my mom, her first words were, oh crap. What's this say?
Oh crap.
And when I told my brother, he said, oh no, are you kidding me?
Oh no. Are you kidding
I'm
me?
very happy.
Oh no.
I wanted that baby very much. I was 9 weeks. We went and had an ultrasound and she was only measuring 7. And I was crying to the doctor and telling him there was something wrong and that the baby was measuring 2 weeks behind. And he said, it's fine. It was probably a false pregnancy test, a false positive. And I said, that's so rare. And I am pregnant. Why would I have a false positive pregnancy test? And he said, don't worry about it. I'm a professional. I know what I'm saying. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. He was very pious and very egotistic. He made me feel stupid for crying and questioning him. We ended up losing that baby. I was 13 weeks along, and I knew when she passed. And then that night I lost her. Being a Jehovah's Witness, losing a baby it's convoluted because they have printed articles talking about how if a child has never taken its first breath, there's no reason to believe it would ever be resurrected. And that was the belief for a long time. And so when the new light came out that there's no reason to believe that Jehovah couldn't put a fetus back into its mother's womb. I mean, he made Jesus magically appear in Mary, so there's no reason to believe that Jehovah isn't capable of doing anything. And so they decided not to presume upon that belief, which was comforting to some degree, I suppose. But being in that belief system, I didn't really process or grieve my baby the way I should have. It just felt like, oh, that didn't work. We can try again. don't be sad. You'll see her again. Probably. And so I kind of just pushed it aside, moved on, and I was like, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm fine. And then some things happened with my mother right around that time that made that experience all the more difficult to process. That's probably a story for another time. In January 2010, we had our second daughter. I knew she'd be a girl. We were so excited after losing that baby. We really wanted our second, and we were so happy to have her. We had our boy and we had our girl, and we thought we were done. I have had issues being on birth control. It messes with my hormones to the point where it makes me really depressed. We had a little surprise. I got pregnant with our third. I was crying and I'm like, I'm sorry. And Cedric is like, why are you sorry? This is wonderful. I'm like, we were done. When we got pregnant with our third, we knew we wanted to do things much differently. The first 2 times that we had our babies, you watch these movies where people go to the hospital and their water breaks. It's all exciting and it's the middle of the night. And I had this very romantic notion of what it was going to be like to give birth in a hospital. And it was not that for me. Both hospital births with my first 2 children were horrific. First time, the doctor wasn't there when I was crowning, and they had to call him in from across the street. And it took 10 minutes of them holding my baby's head inside me and screaming, don't push, just wait for him to come. Then we had our second baby, and I had a cold at the time, which made breathing deeply very difficult. And I was strapped to the bed on monitors, and they would not let me off the monitors, and they would not let me walk around in this hospital and move through contractions. So you're basically just strapped to this bed with a belt around the thing that's causing you agony as they're telling you you can't move. And I couldn't breathe. So I opted for an epidural, which did not work. I progressed really fast from like a 7 to a 10 almost immediately. And my husband told the nurse, she progresses really fast. You should probably get a doctor here. And he's like, okay, thank you, sir. And then he goes, she's pushing, there's the head. And then everything went crazy. And they're like, oh my gosh. They called the doctor, but he was at home in bed asleep. And so it took him 30 minutes to get to the hospital. 30 minutes of them holding her head in me and screaming at me not to push. And it was all because of some bureaucratic legislation. Nurses aren't allowed to attend births because if the head comes and the shoulders get stuck, the baby could die because the doctor's not present or whatever, some legal thing. That combined with the horrible experience we had with our miscarriage and the way the doctor handled that whole situation. So this time we researched a midwife and having a home birth. This changed everything. Having a home birth was the most empowering experience I've ever had. I realized that when I lost our second baby, what an individual she was, what I had lost. And when I got pregnant with my third, I immediately got scared that I would lose this one, because the very first thought I had when I got pregnant with our second was, oh no. And when I got pregnant with our third child, I had that thought of like, oh no. In some way, I felt like I lost our second baby by not wanting it enough. And so I begged our third baby to stay inside me. I nicknamed it Sticky, begging it to stick and stay, and that I wanted it and that it was loved. And that whole pregnancy I spent researching home births and basically everything you have to know about your body, about birth, and about things that could go wrong, things you can do to prevent things from going wrong. It was very, very empowering to understand that I didn't have to hand my care over to a professional, that I could become a professional in that way. And I did. That opened up a part of my mind that helped me for the rest of my life. And when she was born, it was incredible. It was incredible to have that experience after the torment that was the first two births, the torture of the hospital, and what a difference it was to be able to stay home, give birth on our terms, be comfortable and confident in my body, in my ability. It was magical. We knew after we had her, we wanted to do that again. Not long after I gave birth to our third child, I really started realizing what we had lost when I miscarried our second baby. It hit me hard. I had never named that baby. I had never really grieved that baby until I had my third child and realized what happened. And so I grieved, and I apologized to her and told her that she was loved, and I'm sorry that I put her out of my head. And I named her. I named her Isabel Aurora Murillo. And her initials are IM, which I didn't recognize the significance of until much later. We moved from California to Washington State, and pretty soon after we got here, we got pregnant, and we lost that baby too. I had a positive pregnancy test, and then the very next day I started bleeding. And so that was pretty devastating. We were excited to add to our family. We also wanted to have them close in age. Moving up here was really difficult, and our family was going through a lot at that time, and we decided to maybe wait a little bit longer. But then I took a pregnancy test, and it was blazing positive. He was very much wanted and very much excited. Out of all of our parents, his dad was the only one who hadn't experienced the grandchildren through pregnancy and little baby newborn and all that. So we wanted to give them that experience. We moved here specifically for that reason. Not long after that, we came to find out that they weren't exactly as loving and supportive as they had initially expressed. Having 4 little kids, it was very difficult to make our meetings, to go out in service, as you might imagine. I mean, we had 4 kids under the age of 6. Imagine trying to get 4 little kids dressed and fed and ready and out the door just to go to the grocery store, let alone to go sit still at a Kingdom Hall for 2 hours.
Stressed out about work because he has to go in late tonight in order to make the meeting, and so he's stressed out about losing his job. So yeah, it's quite stressful today. I just made espresso with one hand. Yay, mommy! So we're getting everybody ready. Mostly in purple, except for this boy. He's in a purple towel.
You'll be purple too.
Are you pretty? You're in purple. Okay, so they're all mostly ready. Gideon needs socks and his hair combed, and Phineas obviously needs clothes. But the girls are all dressed and their hair's all done, and I did it by myself. And I'm nutty nuts.
Trying to keep them quiet and happy at a meeting when it's supposed to be little kids' bedtimes. It's ridiculous. It's kind of rather barbaric, but it is expected as a Jehovah's Witness. It is required to take your children as often as possible. And not only that, but to study ahead of time and to prepare answers. And if you don't, you have this immense guilt for not doing that and not doing enough. It was the fact that we had 4 little kids keeping us so busy that we couldn't attend our meetings that started our waking up process. We were not constantly indoctrinated with a steady stream of propaganda, because we weren't at every meeting and we weren't constantly out in service. Despite the guilt I constantly felt for not doing enough to keep us at meetings and at conventions, oh man, when I would have to miss a convention, I would cry and cry and cry. And every time I would miss a convention, it would feel like Armageddon was going to come that weekend and we were going to be left out. We weren't going to survive Armageddon coming because we weren't there. So Jehovah's Witnesses don't want you having children. They consider it a burden. They consider children enemies of God.
People say of a little baby, look at that little angel. But more accurate would be to say, look at that little enemy of God.
It is hard to have kids, but in my heart, I knew Jehovah loves children. Why are we being discouraged from having children? Having 4 kids was really, really hard. Having 4 kids as a Jehovah's Witness in an apartment without a yard with a husband who worked night shifts for 12 hours was really, really, really hard. However, part of us still felt like we weren't done. We both really wanted one more girl. So we have 5 children now. Having kids has been the most amazing, life-changing, educational part of our lives. And as hard as it can be, especially without love and support from grandparents or a tribe, I wouldn't change any of it. Kids will try you and test you, and they'll push your buttons, and they'll point out your insecurities and your flaws and the things that you need to heal in yourself. And that all is part of it. That's all part of the education. This is a path that I needed. I needed each one of them. They have all taught me something different. They have all taught me something I never knew I needed to know. The entire process, even the ones I've lost, have been an education in something I never knew I wanted. It's daunting to think that Jehovah's Witnesses know that this wakes you up. Having kids wakes you up in more ways than you can count. Teach your children to witness to their kids at school and tell their classmates that they're going to die at Armageddon. It's absurd. To look in your little baby's eyes and have to think to yourself that one day you might have to shun them. Jehovah's Witnesses preach about a time when there'll be an unnatural affection, and yet they are commanding an unnatural affection to shun your own children. We had our kids despite Jehovah's Witnesses. We had our kids because we were Jehovah's Witnesses. Every time I had a baby, I thought it'll be fine. Jehovah will take care of us. Paradise will be here so soon. We won't have to worry about raising these kids in this system. We won't have to worry about raising teenagers in this system. We won't have to be worried about them being adults in this system. My oldest is 17 years old now. My youngest just turned 7. I remember when I was told that I wouldn't go to school, and my oldest is about to graduate next year. If we hadn't had kids, we would never have woken up. We would have been able to stay loyal, submissive drones. It would have been easy with just 2 to go to every meeting and train them and raise them up right. But having 3 and then 4 and then 5 woke us up. The magic contained in this life begins once you start to trust the process. I've talked to my children before they've had ears. They've taught me more about grief and life and death than that religion ever did. Having the typical 2 children that you can as Jehovah's Witnesses in a hospital taught me all I needed to know about bureaucracy, how to obey orders no matter how much it hurt, and to cooperate, all for the sake of their legislation disguised as legitimacy. And having 3 bonus kids that ended up keeping me out of Jehovah's Witnesses, keeping me more busy than they ever did, having them at home taught me how to do the unconventional, how to do the forbidden research, and advocate for what I knew was right. So I guess you could say I had kids for every other reason I've ever done anything else that was right in my life. I trusted my instincts.